I'm so thankful that Melissa mentioned her European ancestry, because I think it's important for everyone to know that you have some form of ethnicity. And
intimate.
But I think it's very important for all of us to acknowledge is that we do come from someplace. We do have ancestors. We do, wherever you come from, you know, and we all have an ethnic base. It has been a rough road, particularly being what is called an Indian. And because there are so many obstacles, stereotypical obstacles that I've had to face down. And don't really like presenting myself as Native American or Choctaw Creek Delaware. But I'm proud of that. But you know, here in New York City, I've only met a few people that have actually recognized me. One was in a detox, and she was of mixed heritage. I was the therapist, she was the patient, and she immediately recognized me by the way I moved. And she asked me right away, and it was amazing. That was the only person that ever, in this city, since I've been here 20 years, has asked me that. But I also think that the definition for Two-Spirit is very subjective. And I think that on the panel here, each of us could provide our own definition of it. It would be similar, but it would also be very different. Because we all are of different experiences, of different tribes, different regions of the country, different, you know, dialects. And some of us speak the language, some of us speak a lot of it, little, none. Some of us are connected or not connected or partially connected. So there's a variety of experience up here. And I think Two-Spirit basically will be continued to be defined. And with groups such as the Northeast Two-Spirit Society, which I think is brilliant, and you know, the organizers are all pretty and the young, but Ben Gibo and I, along with Leo the Lone Dog, Miriam Miguel, Curtis Harris, were the original founders of We Brought Barchiampi, and then, you know, wonderful people like Kent joined us later on. But so, you know, we were actually the first group in New York City to have the Two-Spirit and begin to use the Two-Spirit. Not that I'm trying to lay claim to it or anything, but, you know, just history. And so, you know, it had its problems, you know, and we can attribute it to many things. But, you know, it had its problems, but it also gave visibility to, you know, Two-Spirits on this coast, East Coast. So I'm very interested in what Two-Spirited means. And I do believe it is culturally bound. I do believe that it is socially imbued, and that it can be, it can reemerge. The expression of it, you know, the expressivity of it, and you know, who is a Two-Spirit?
How come?
First off, I'd like to have everybody give a hand for the female Two-Spirits in the room and in the audience and out there. I don't think we can... You know, summer of 2004, when you know, the first thing, like everybody else kind of my age, was I jumped on the internet and I, you know, Googled Native American gay, you know, gay Indian, and to tell you the truth, there wasn't anything out there. You know, I was trying to educate people on Verdash, and then immediately, you know, people were like, I don't know if that's such a good term. And for those of you in the audience, Verdash comes from, I think, an Arabic term for kept boy or slave boy. So unless that's what you're into, and I asked the center, and they said there's this guy named Harlan Cruden who's organizing a Two-Spirit powwow. And, you know, I contacted him, and he's a very busy man, but we eventually got them together. And I think at that same time, Melissa Hoskins, she was looking to start a group as well, or be a part of a group, and that's sort of basically the beginnings of the Northeast Two-Spirit Society. And at that meeting, I did learn about Wiwa and Barchiampi. First I learned how to say it, and then I learned how to, what it was all about. There needed to be some sort of a web presence, I think, and that was one of the first things I did was, you know, I knew that people in my generation, I guess, as I said in the beginning of my story, the first thing that we do is we jump on the internet. You know, I think that if you don't exist on the internet, basically at a certain age range, you don't exist. And so that was one of the first things that I did, is I wanted to make sure that there was web presence. My reservation sponsored a night at the stadium, and I brought my boyfriend and my best friend. We were sitting there in the front and watching this game, and this guy walks by and he has a t-shirt, and the t-shirt says, 1 man plus 1 woman equals marriage. And this is an Indian guy, he's from a reservation. And I was so pissed, and that old part of me, you know, that old, I'm from the res, you know, part was like, where's my phone, was like, I'm gonna kick this guy's ass, you know, I'm gonna beat him up, and I was like, everybody was like, stop, slow down, slow down. And then he passed an elder from my reservation, and the elder goes like this. He goes like this. And that hurt. And I think that that is why that this group is here. Because when our reservations, or when our people, when we get shunned on our reservations and we get shunned by our people, we need to have a place that's safe. And we need to have a place that the elders can say, you know, even when the elders don't have as much gray hair as we think that they, we imagine them to, that they say, you know, to us that, you know, the ones that have passed are speaking through you. And I was so nervous tonight, and I grabbed my friend Marlon, who's from Washington, D.C., and I said, I'm so nervous. He said, the ones that have passed are speaking through you. And he held me, and then I got strength from that. And so I just, you know, had to speak my piece and say that that's, you know, that's how I feel about it. And I think that that's why the Northeast Two-Spirit Society is so important. And it's not just to have a panel, it's not just to have a powwow, but those things actually build, you know, a person's self-esteem, build a people's self-esteem, and build who they are to just walk that red road and to continue to be better LGBT people and to bring it back to the larger LGBT community. So,
I did have the honor of working for many, many years with a lot of our traditional leadership from out west, from our territory in South Dakota and North Dakota. We had an enormous territory aboriginally, and I have done, for the past 15 years, I've worked on international human rights issues with our traditional leadership at the United Nations, trying to change some of the international laws to recognize indigenous peoples from all over the world and our right to self-determination. So I have had the blessing of working for a long time with some of our traditional folks. And I was very touched by Kevin's story just now, because it's interesting, because that generation that I imagine that elder was from was probably about my age. And we're often called the lost generation, the ones whose parents and sometimes us went to boarding schools. And because of the boarding school history, and I don't mean to offend the Christians in the room, but the Christianization of our cultures, a lot of that traditional respect for the differences and the uniqueness and the diversity that is the hallmark of all of our cultures was lost. And but what's really interesting is, if you go back a couple generations, if you're lucky enough to know people who are around from before that, or who were brought up in a more traditional way, they don't have that judgment of us, and they understand still that we have a place. And I think that's something that's really important to talk about.